Hello there, welcome back to our set of shows. I'm going to start off this week's shows with What the Hell Is This, which is a new release called Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny. Now, you've probably heard of this film, which has come out and is, well, not done very well, is the best way to put the situation. It's kind of a bomb, and it's a notorious bomb already because they spent so much money on it, and the film came out and no one's that into it. I mean, the best you get is some people who are into nostalgia think, oh, it's not so bad, and other people just hating on it. It's a divisive film in a sense that, but it's divisive in the sense that some people really hate it and some people just think it's fine. It's not really that, you know, it's not a beloved film for many people. Um, I hated it. I really thought it was a disaster. It was. But you don't want to go into the tribes of people saying, "Oh, I've got an ideological reason why I didn't like it." Just like I just didn't think it was a very good film. That was it. I didn't have any problem with Indy being a washed-up guy at this point. I think you can either have the heroes go on and do well, or they can be more flawed as they get older. The more flawed way is the more interesting way, but you have to do it right. And I don't think the film did it right. So I didn't have the problem with the idea of it. I just don't think they really went for it in a way that was interesting, in a way that you can make you engage in the film. So that was my big problem with it. It's also as a habit now. I mean, there is this thing of like in Lucasfilms, like Han Solo was depressing bitter, Luke Skywalker's depressing bitter, now Indiana Jones. It's like you're doing the same script basically, and none of these scripts really delivered. I mean, I think the best one was Last Jedi for the Luke Skywalker, but even that annoyed so many people. And I think there's probably a way to do it and not do that and still get what you wanted to get. So I think it's a case of the execution has been a problem and falling back in a certain style of, narrative, which Hollywood does all the time. I mean, any period they hit something they like for some political reason, and they throw that at you for a couple of years and everyone gets sick of it. It's like, can we get something new, please? This is boring. And we've got the cranky old white guy thing. I think everyone's now kind of sick of it. So there we go. I don't think it's for ideological reasons. I just feel like people are sick of it. It's like you did it once or twice, that was fine, but do something new now. This is just lazy. So there's that. But I mean, the reason I wanted to talk about Dial of Destiny was it's two different types of bad movies that Hollywood makes all in one. Now there's the first 2 hours, which is the boring movie, the boring bad movie, which Hollywood does a lot of. You've seen, I think everyone's seen blockbusters was like there's no momentum, there's no direction to the film, it's just set piece after set piece, and you're like, why do I care? There's no real threat here. It's just things happening. And then there's another type of bad movie, which is the last 20 minutes when it goes crazy, which goes into so bad it's good territory. That one, that kind of prefer, frankly, because at least you have fun with that. But this is not a very good version of it. It's even like what I'd call a piss poor crazy man thing. It's like, it's crazy compared to what came before it, but it's not exactly like John Boorman crazy or Tim Burton crazy. It's just like mediocre crazy even. It's like, it's acceptable crazy, but not quite. But compared to what came the rest of the film, it looks really crazy. But it's not in the same league as some top level or tools going mad with a mega budget. It's no Exodus to the Heretic for absolute batshit insanity. so, so yeah, I mean, it is a kind of so bad as good insanity, which that doesn't have any of the mood for the rest of. They have plot lines that suggest that it could come, but it tonally does not match with the rest of the film, and it's not doesn't work, and the effects are terrible. So it's a film with lots of problems. It's a film that doesn't really have much that's not a problem. But to be honest, the interesting thing about it is how boring it is, how badly done it is, how tedious it is. It's not even interestingly bad. It's bad in a way that just sends you to sleep. So the film starts off with a flashback with a young Indiana Jones trying to find the spear of destiny, the thing that touched Christ, the spirit that touched Christ and is blessed by his blood. And Indy and one of his friends are trying to chase it down at the end of World War II. And of course, because it's Harrison Ford and he's much older now, they do de-age and stuff, which is okay, but it's de-aging and the whole sequence is kind of CGI. At least to me, it seems very CGI. They try their best to have Indiana Jones type gags here, the stuff you'd expect. And it probably is the bit of the film that's more life to it, but still, it's not that great. I mean, compare it to like the second half of Temple of Doom or the entirety of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it looks pretty bad. Even some of the stuff in Crystal Skull was more fun than this. And of course, get a question of the way: is it worse than Crystal Skull? Easily, yes. Much, much worse. Crystal Skull was a full blown insane Indiana Jones film. That was what I was talking about earlier on with the so bad it's good, or it's crazy, or it's something. It had full blown auteurs going with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg going crazy in that film. So even though you had some stuff that was questionable, they were well into trying something weird and doing these weird alien interdimensional things and Aztecs, and it was not the work of sane people, but it was enjoyable for how they went for this crazy thing, and they did the Soviet stuff. They did all these like 50s Cold War monster movie cliches, and they'd watched all these films as kids. So even though you had the problem of the miscasting of Shia LaBeouf as the son of Indy, there's still some charm there. It still has that craziness. It's not exactly a good film, but it's an interesting mess. It's far more, for me, it's far more enjoyable than this, which is just bland. So even though Crystal Skull had some really bad dialogue scenes and some really obvious dialogue scenes, this one is just bland. This is just, it doesn't even have the energy to be bad. So that makes it worse for me, because that's the most being boring is the most shameful form of being bad in my book. So the film starts with this flashback scene. Nothing much happens. It goes on forever, and it's one of those scenes that's like in Temple of Doom or Raiders or Last Crusade. They'd get this over with in about 3 minutes or something. This scene, you'd get the point, and you'd get to the point, and you need a dialogue scene that connects it to other things. And this is just action, and Indy getting caught, Indy escaping, try to catch this thing. It's very busy, but there's not much to it. It's just nostalgia bait, really. So yeah, I just thought it was okay, but not better than what was going to come after, but not much better. Then we go to old Indy, and this is where the film really goes off the rails. Is you jump from him being young to old, and they don't commit. They commit to him being old and grumpy and not living past his prime and trying to make sense of a life that has had its problems. But they were scared of going fully into that. They didn't want to alienate the audience. So you get a kind of half depressed Indy, half charming, character that reminds you of the older Indy, kind of, but he's old and grumpy, very Harrison Fordy. But they don't really go far enough. If they're going to go this far, and when you get the reason why he's like this, it feels like the first half is a cop out. The whole thing is, every time you find a reason for certain things happening, it's like, did they think this through and put it through the whole film and make it actually consistent? Nah, I don't bother. Just they want an Indiana Jones film, so they take away all the interesting elements and blandicize it to make this things are happening type of film where you don't really have emotional investment. So he's kind of depressed. No one's interested in his lectures. He's living in this terrible apartment. He's getting divorced from Marion. and there's all things going on, and you find the reason for it. But it was like, for the reason for it, he would be far worse than he was. If you want to make it interesting, instead, it's just this kind of thing: is they don't want to go full Luke Skywalker from Last Jedi. They don't want to alienate everybody that much. But it's like that would have been a gutsy thing to go do, to go really full on into this. Instead, it's like just kind of half and half, and it's just dull. And it was the same problem I had with Logan, actually. James Mangold directed this film, directed Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, The Wolverine. He's done some good films. The Three Tenth of Yuma remake. I like some of his films. But Logan got great reviews, and I think it had suffered from the same problems I had here, but it's just a much better film because it was simpler. It was connected to the idea of Logan being a depressed, dark figure in a world he can't quite understand anymore. But that one had also like a meandering story about past sins and things like that. But again, I also thought in that one it didn't go far enough into the darkness of the character and the situation. I thought it was kind of like half in, half out. But at least it had some grit to it. This one is far more commercialized and compromised. This is like the people's reactions to this is kind of what I felt, because I was one of those people who saw Logan and thought, it's okay, it's fine, but no, it's not great. In strange ways, I kind of like the Wolverine more, even though the Wolverine is a mad ending, just like this film. The Wolverine film was actually quite decent until the ending, which is a difference. That film seemed to know what it was a bit more. And even though the Wolverine generally is viewed by most people as being inferior to Logan, I would probably watch that more than watch Logan because it's more fun. And just like Logan kind of is like, I think Logan's a reputation it might not fully deserve. But when you got into this one, it really feels like the darkness they were trying to hint at just is washed away whenever there's an action scene. It's just like, we're not going to do that. And the dialogue scenes just seem to start and then they stop for a plot twist. And they start again later on, stop a plot twist. And you've got lots of these action scenes that are all double the amount of time that they need. And that's the big thing you realize about Spielberg. Spielberg knows when to stop doing action. Like, he knows when it gets boring. He understands the concept of getting from A to B and then stop and have breathing room in the film for other things. Even though Raiders Lost Ark is one damn thing after another, if you look at all the action scenes, they don't last that long. They last a lot longer in your head than they actually do in reality. They actually are fairly disciplined in that. And this one, it lasts a very long time. It feels to last way too long. And most of the scenes, the big problem they've got is they don't have great villains. Mads Mikkelsen as this Nazi who, after the war, was brought into the American space program, and now he's a lot of power. Now he's after Dial Destiny because he's still a mad Nazi. And he's a vague villain, and no matter how much Nicholson tries, and he's a really good actor, he's not given much to. He's not given a big speech that's scary that makes you think, okay, this guy's really scary. Instead, he just does guys chasing something. And he always seems to be very lucky about where he finds it. There's no reason throughout the film or why he keeps on catching up with Indiana Jones. There's never a reason why. He just, like, once in a while there's a reason, but most of the time it's just luck, just because they need them there so they can do an action scene. It's like they don't ever. Either it's we don't know why he figured this out, or it's a case of the hero do something that stupid that there's no way he can't figure it out. And it's that kind of thing. It's like he shows up once in a scene. It's like there's no logical reason why you'd know they were there. There's no clues, no nothing. There's nothing here that would tell you where they're going next. So the villain is just vague, and he's just some henchmen who are vague. So the film doesn't have any momentum for threat. You know, you look at George Lucas, he was good at choosing villains and having villains that are always in the chase, so there's always some momentum to the action scenes. We don't get that here. And there's not that many of them. They're always hiring henchmen are easily disposable. So the disposable villains of the earlier films of all the different Nazis and different cult members they killed off felt that they should be there. And this one is like, why is anybody's here? And if they create reasons why there's more villains to beat up, and for the chase scenes to happen, and a lot of the time there's a lot of huffing and puffing in the script. And I guess taking up more time for an action scene you don't actually need. There's a whole action scene in Tangier that you like. It's like, what's the point of this action scene? It could have done in a room, and have still have got the. If you're in a room with a gun, you would have still been the same plot place than you were in that Tangier chase, because it's just trying to find something, try to grab hold of something, and it's going back and forth to people. But you don't have a threat. You're just watching this stuff happen, and it's like, why I'm so bored watching this. There's just a lot of complication, but there's no actual motivation for the action. And the films get that problem throughout. It's like there's a scene early on, which is shot in Glasgow, it's meant to be New York in the 60s, where Indiana Jones is getting taken by the villains and he escapes. He's chased down this big parade. And it should be exciting, but it's just boring. It's just like there's no threat. The villains don't seem scary. Like, why doesn't he just go to the police? And there's just so much things. Like, there's a policeman gets shot or something, but the more one policeman around, and it just becomes very unmotivated. So that's why you don't want to set something in America like that. It's like, because the films don't have that many people in the group. So it's like, it just becomes this thing of, I'm looking at who's chasing who and what's involved, and I don't see the real threat. I just see a lot of people moving around a lot. The one thing with that sequence is it was shot in Glasgow, and I know the street they shot it in. I used to walk along there to work, and it's kind of interesting to watch this street that's like I type to being going to a job I don't like to now being used in a action scene, and it intersects with another street that was used a lot in the Flash. So the Flash and Indiana Jones were like different streets that were connecting up with this. And Hobbs and Shaw also shot around here as well. Just one small area in Glasgow that's getting used a lot. So the action's just boring, and it gets more boring as on, because I mean, after the Tangier thing, there's underwater scene, and this is where I thought, oh my god, this is just a Roger Moore Bond film. That's what this is. It's like a leading man who's too old for the part. Lots of stunt doubles are obviously stunt doubles. Lots of technological trickery to try and hide the fact that they shouldn't be making this film with this actor because he's too old and looks too frail. And there's a general lifelessness to a lot of this plotting as well, because they can only do so much. They can't be too intense with the action. And it just creates this kind of inertia that's floating throughout the film. So by the time you get the second half, after you've actually seen like you've had one fair action scene, two massively boring action scenes, and then you've underwater action scene, and at this point you're thinking, I don't give a crap anymore. I just don't care. So please don't do any more action scenes. It's not good. They're not good. And because I mean, they take away from the fact there's not much character going on. I mean, Phoebe Waller-Bridge plays this goddaughter, and who's the instigator of this whole thing, and she's the one who starts it all off because her father was possessed by the Devil of Destiny, and she's trying to use it for money. But does she care about India? Does she not? Is she using them? There's all these different plot things about her character and trying to figure out who she is. And the writers don't actually figure it out. They just have lots of different scenes where she acts differently, and it's like there's no character here. You're giving an actor something that can't really be played efficiently because there's no character. And she's a sidekick who's boring. So you've got the lifeless villains, you've also the hero, one of whom is your old guy who they haven't done enough with the character to make it justify this film, and he's too old to do the action scenes. You have two bland characters who don't fit in the film, and they're the ones you might be rooting for. So that does not help the action. Then you have a underwater scene that just goes on for a while and is pretty dull, and it does feel like it's from Few Eyes Only. And then there's other stuff. They go to this cave where Indiana Jones can suddenly climb this face cliff thing when he's in his 80s. And it's like, I have a father in his 80s, he can barely walk. No, no. And there's a lot of actions like that. It's like, no, there's no way he can do that. And the whole thing is this point is farcical, and there's moving through these caves to find the artifact, and then there's other action scenes after that, and there's twists and turns, and at this point you're bored to tears because nothing interesting is happening. The characters are dull. The situation is just like pass the parcel with these few objects. It's not actually any more. Nothing's motivated. But remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? At this time they're trying to get the Ark, and people are getting it, and then he's getting it back and stuff. But it feels motivated, like you know what the threat is of the Ark. You know why he needs to get it. You know everything about it, why it's a threat. Here it's a dial that does something you don't quite know about, and you're dealing with people who are very vaguely defined, and it's like there's no motivation of interested. It's just things happening, just stuff's happening in the film, and you should be interested because it's an Indiana Jones film, but you're not because the writing's not been done properly, and you've had scene after scene where not enough character work's been going on. The dialogue's not witty. It's just sarcasm, but badly done. It's just basic stuff. It feels like a first draft, even though this script went through so many drafts, and yet the final film feels like a first draft where they've mapped out rough things you want to do, and then you'll fill it in and take out the boring bits and put other stuff in, but they didn't do it. That's what it feels like, even though it was butchered repeatedly. So the film just lies there. I mean, it's like the only one thing I would say about it is not as bad as Rise of Skywalker. It's not that incompetent as Rise of Skywalker. It's just boring. Rise of Skywalker was terrible, but at least it was much more crazy bad, like the end of this film, rather than the boring bad. So this one is boring bad. But if I put a gun to my head, I'd watch Rise of Skywalker over this one. Because Rise of Skywalker was insane and stupid and had so many problems, but this one is just dull. You get to the end, and by the time you get to this mad ending where they go back in time to the time of Archimedes and they fight the Romans who are attacking the Greeks out of nowhere. It's mad, it's crazy, but the effects are terrible. You don't have any emotion attached to anybody at this point, and you're just watching things happen. And it's like, then you have this bit where Indiana Jones is like wanting to stay back in history because he loves history, and it's like, that should have been a theme that was more developed, like his love of history. Like they put bits in about it, but it's not developed in an interesting way where that would really land. And it's a shame because the best scene in the film are the ones where Mangold's allowed to just work with his actors a little bit more, where it's not been a sarcastic grifter scene, it's just them talking. Those are the best scenes in the film. But a lot of the time they're undone by the fact that they haven't been developed to get to those points, so they feel kind of lackluster, even though they're fine. It's just that they haven't been developed. It's like if you had scenes leading up to them that would work better, they would have worked. But the film doesn't have that. It's just this shapeless mass of things moving around, and it's just a waste. And at the end, Indiana Jones gets back with his wife. Spoilers, I guess, if you cared at this point. I didn't. And it's just a disaster film. It's just like one of those films that the more you think about it, the more you're like, oh my God. Why didn't they just stay back when that script and said, okay, let's think about it for a few days and see what we think then? And then just said, no. That's what they should have done. Instead, they went into this film, spent a fortune in this film, and no one's interested. No one cared. No one wanted the film in the first place because it was like, well, he's too old to play this part. And it's a common sense thing that everyone said before they heard about it. And it's like, yes, and the people who made the decisions did not have the common sense. So we got this dull disaster of a film. That's the worst of the series by a mile. Doesn't even have the grace of to be mad like Crystal Skull. And it's just blah. and dull and boring. And good luck getting through it. Good luck staying awake through some of these scenes because they're fairly tedious. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with another video, but that's me for now. Right, bye.